Hello aspirants, looking at editorials and question bank for 14th December. The first editorial in the Hindu newspaper is Through a Storm Safely. So this is regarding the cyclone Varda which struck Chennai. So this editorial is appreciating the efforts put in by the Tamil Nadu government. So after the December 2015 Chennai floods, the government disaster management apparatus was well in place. The disaster warning messages reached efficiently to the city dwellers and the adjoining districts as well. So this helped in curbing the effects of disaster. So disaster, the fierce winds did blew. It resulted in bringing the power and communication cables down. Roads were blocked. Trees fell. Air service, railway service were disrupted. But then the government worked overnight and trees on the roads were removed so that some form of traffic could play. So it did take initiatives on this front also. Then the second thing highlighted is regarding the role played by social media. So the official messages, community-based messages could be efficiently passed through the internet, and even the outcome of the disaster was minimized. Then now in the second part of the editorial, it talks about the initiatives which can be further taken, because it highlights that cities are the ones which see maximum development, and cities in the coastal regions are also the ones which face the maximum wrath of such disasters like cyclones. Another thing is that the eastern coast of India is more vulnerable to cyclones. So now why is this so too, we'll discuss further. The three recommendations which this editorial gives to prevent such cases in the future, to better manage the disaster in the future as well, are: one is that the government can initiate some form of insurance for property loss post such disasters. So this is one point. Second, it highlights that rooftop solar and battery storage systems can be used so that they can become supplementary power sources in such cases when power cables come down. And finally, it says that trees with strong root systems should be planted, and the canopy, the entire trees, leaves and everything, the entire canopy, it can be pruned, cut short, so that during the cyclone season, the uprooting is minimized. So these are some recommendations which it has put forth. Now looking at the question, why cyclones are more prevalent in the Bay of Bengal as compared to Arabian Sea. So cyclones do occur in Arabian Sea also, but they are more prevalent in the Bay of Bengal. What are the reasons for the same? So tropical cyclone is a low pressure depression which is formed in the environment. So what are the conditions which are favorable for these, and how they are prevalent in the Bay of Bengal rather than Arabian Sea? So there are three major conditions. First one is sea surface temperature. So the ideal temperature for a tropical cyclone formation should be around 25 to 27 degrees Celsius. So this is the temperature at which the moisture, temperature can hold sufficient moisture and enough force so that the cyclone can develop. So Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea are approximately on the same latitudinal range, but then so they receive the same amount of insolation, incoming solar radiation, but then Bay of Bengal is warmer than the Arabian Sea. Now what are the reasons for that too? That we'll see in the second part. So because of high sea surface temperatures or preferable sea surface temperatures on Bay of Bengal, cyclones do occur here. Then it is the same. This is the case with respect to USA too, that east coast of USA is having more of hurricanes occurring because that is also relatively warmer. Then second point is about easterly jet streams. So these are the wind systems, and these winds are named after the point of origin. So they originate from the east. So when they are originating from the east, say from the Pacific Ocean, from those regions, it's coming to Bay of Bengal. So they are moving towards Bay of Bengal, but in the Arabian Sea case, it moves, these easterly jet streams move towards the African coast. So that's why easterly jet streams are more prevalent in Bay of Bengal region. The third point is additional influx of moisture from southwestern Pacific Ocean. So there are lots of typhoons which originate. Typhoons are other names. So hurricanes, typhoons, cyclones all mean the same. There are different names based on where they occur. That also we'll see later in this same video. So these lots of typhoons occur in southwestern Pacific Ocean, and they get carried towards India in the northwestern direction. So this leftover moisture in them also results in additional moisture being provided to Bay of Bengal system. Next we look at why is the Bay of Bengal relatively warmer than the Arabian Sea. So Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea are both along the same latitude as we said, but then in Arabian Sea there are strong winds blowing towards African coast, the mountain ranges there. So this results in the insolation, incoming solar radiation is same, but the insolation is taken forward by these winds and they carry it further, so the Arabian Sea becomes relatively cooler, while in Bay of Bengal no such thing happens. Second thing is that in Bay of Bengal it receives more rainfall, so southwest monsoon means more of rainfall comes to Bay of Bengal region, and also the rivers which drain into Bay of Bengal like Ganga, Brahmaputra and all major rivers, they drain into Bay of Bengal, so they bring in a lot of fresh water, and when this fresh water comes on the surface, the water column there stabilizes, and again the winds are not able to mix up this water and take away the insolation, so it also further results in the Bay of Bengal remaining warmer. So these reasons are there for Bay of Bengal to be warmer and resulting in cyclones being formed there. So then the tropical cyclone distribution, you can see it is towards the eastern coasts only. So east coast of USA, east coast of Africa. So it does not happen in the Arabian Sea. It all goes towards eastern coast of Africa, east coast of India, this east coast of China. All these are the places where cyclones occur, tropical cyclones occur, and they are known by different names. So here in this region they are called cyclones. In USA they are called hurricanes in the Pacific Ocean, and here East Asia they are called typhoons. Next, this is the cyclone, how it looks. So these cyclones which develop over the Indian Ocean, hurricanes, again it's showing how where they are named. So hurricanes are in Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, typhoons in Western Pacific Ocean. So this is the different nomenclatures. Then formation of tropical cyclones. So this warm temperature, when the temperature is warm enough, so this results in warm air rising. Evaporation takes place, water vapors rise into the atmosphere. As they go high enough, these water vapors condense, they cool, and because of this latent heat is released, and this latent heat results in the temperature here becoming again a little higher. So again the warm air rises further, and this is how the cyclones are formed. So this, as air rises, it cools. So as we go higher up in the atmosphere, in the lower reaches of the atmosphere, as height increases, temperature decreases in the troposphere. So this, as they go higher, they become cooler, and then saturation point occurs and they condense. So these water vapors condenses into liquid droplets. They become clouds, thunder clouds as such, and then this condensation releases latent heat of vapor and further warming the atmosphere. So this, again air going further, this results in the cyclonic formation, and these cyclones are circular in nature, so circular movement of winds. Why do they take place? This is also explained through Coriolis effect. Now what is this Coriolis effect? You should understand. This is the equator. The earth rotates around its axis, so this is the direction the earth rotates. If you look from top, then it is counterclockwise direction in which the earth is rotating. So when the earth is rotating, if movement takes place from along the longitude, means along vertically like this, if somebody is moving from the equator towards the north, so if we are trying to say this, in this example we are talking of wind. So if the wind is moving from the equator towards the north, then this is what is the intended region. So if you are at this point in Africa, you want to move at this point here, so this will be the way you would be moving. But then what happens is that the earth is also rotating. So when the earth rotates, in a day it completes one complete rotation. So as the earth rotates, this actual movement then becomes like this. So though wind is being pushed vertically up, but then the actual region where it will reach will be this, because by that time it's moving higher up in the upper reaches, the earth is also rotating gradually. So this is the movement it will pass. So though you will think that in say particular time frame from here you would reach here, but since earth has also moved and you are moving up above the earth's surface, you're not on the land, these are winds on the atmosphere, so they are moving, actually they will reach here. So as you go higher up towards the poles, the Coriolis effect is more and more, and it is zero at the equator. So that's the idea. So here this will be the bend. So this Coriolis effect, this is called Ferrel's law with respect to Coriolis effect, that in the northern hemisphere the deflection happens towards the right, and in the southern hemisphere deflection happens towards the left. So this is a very important geographical concept for Coriolis effect and the Ferrel's law of deflection in right and left in northern and southern hemisphere. So this Coriolis effect is seen in tropical cyclones too. So that is the reason why tropical cyclones have this circular movement of winds, because winds, though moving straight, they turn. So this deflection in the right, if they are moving like this, and towards left if they are moving down. So this, you can see, this results in a circular motion and cyclonic circulations take place. So in the northern hemisphere, the cyclonic movement is, if you look from top, is in counterclockwise direction, and in southern hemisphere it is clockwise direction. Then the next editorial is free flow of wheat. So this is regarding the center's decision to waive the import duty on wheat, so it will become to 0. So this decision is being criticized because the government has been varying on the import duties on wheat from 10% to 25%. It went back to 10% and now it has brought it down to 0% in 500 days. So what is the signal which it is giving to the farmers and traders? So overall, globally, we are seeing that wheat prices are going down. In India, the minimum support price is quite high, higher than the wheat prices globally. So if the import duties are low, of course, then it will result in wheat being coming into the market and reducing the prices too. So of course, the farmers and the farmer unions are saying that it would result in distressed sale of wheat, but then the government needs to take in initiatives to highlight about MSP, improve their procuring. But what is happening, as we discussed in news also about this, was that the procuring is not taking place by the government. So though MSP is minimum support price, which the government has assured to the farmers and should buy this wheat from them at this price, but then government is not able to procure. So this procurement system is not in place. So then farmers have no other option but to sell it in the market, and selling in the market gives them lower than MSP price. So this is the point. Even this is being, because of demonetization too, it was felt that the wheat crop which will be sown in the Rabi season, it's a Rabi crop. So during this winter season, it is being sown and it will be harvested in March. So it was felt that the sowing season would be affected because farmers would have no currency with them. But then the government has said that the wheat sowing has taken place as much as it was earlier, but rather more of land is under wheat cultivation this year. So there is no distress for the farmers due to demonetization. So if that is the case, then why do they want to bring in import of wheat? Means they are fearing that wheat production would be less than required. So this is one point which is to be considered. Also, UP and Punjab are two major wheat producing states which are going to assembly polls soon. So the government needs to clarify its stand here. Also, a long-term measure which the editorial is suggesting is that India needs to increase its wheat production, because compared to China and even Bangladesh, our wheat yield is quite low. So that is another recommendation. This is about the flip-flops in the import duty on wheat. It has presently gone down to 0, as we see. And then this is the production of wheat in India over the years. Right? Next, we look at the question bank. So the first question, two questions framed for this day. The first question is, discuss the exemplary role played by India in the foundation of Bangladesh. So this is with respect to 16 December, which will be the 45th day of Vijay Diwas, the day when Pakistan army surrendered in East Bengal. So that is, East Bengal is Bangladesh. At that point of time, it was East Pakistan. So this happened in 1971 on 16 December. So this all started with the elections in 1970 in Pakistan. So the background is that Awami League was a political party in East Bengal, means East Pakistan. So Pakistan, when India and Pakistan got divided, Pakistan got East Bengal and West Punjab. So Pakistan then was not geographically together. There were two different parts. Means Punjab, one Punjab remained in India and West Punjab went to Pakistan. So Punjab as a state was divided between India and Pakistan, and on the eastern side, Bengal as a state was divided into West Bengal and East Bengal. That is why our state is called West Bengal, though it's on the eastern side of India. So this West Bengal stays with India and East Bengal went to Pakistan. So that was a different entity. So that became East Pakistan and West Pakistan were the two entities. And in 1971, Pakistan lost East Pakistan and East Pakistan became an independent country, Bangladesh. So Bangladesh was born in 1971 and this was the India-Pakistan War of 1971 which helped Bangladesh gain independence and it became an independent country. So India did play a significant role in the formation of Bangladesh. Now what is being discussed here is the precursor to this. So in 1970 there were elections in Pakistan, and in these elections Awami League, which was a political party in East Bengal, in East Pakistan then. So this party got almost all the seats in the provincial assemblies. So it got complete absolute majority, except the nominated seats, it won all the seats. So then when the overall election results were seen, then Awami League became the major political party. Means Awami League would form the government in the capital of Pakistan. So the Awami League's leader Mujibur Rahman would become the Prime Minister of India. Then that was what would happen probably. So this meant that in Islamabad, in West Pakistan, which was the hub of government, the East Bengal would come, political party would come to power. So this was not at all acceptable to then Prime Minister Bhutto. This was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. So here it is. So Zulfikar Ali Bhutto then threatened the president. Then it was Yahya Khan who was the president, General Yahya Khan. He threatened that if Mujibur Rahman becomes the Prime Minister of Pakistan, then he would completely oppose the government, and then this actually did not happen. He was not even invited to form the government, and this initiated the civil disobedience movement in East Pakistan. This clearly highlighted the differences between the two entities, because West Pakistan considered itself elite and this Bengali speaking population in East Pakistan was looked down upon. So there were differences here. Even the civil services was not equitably distributed amongst the two population groups, armed forces, everywhere it was seen that discrimination prevailed. So this second-hand treatment which they gave to this Bengali speaking population, considering Pakistan as the elite Urdu speaking population, this resulted in the divide becoming clear when they did not allow Mujibur Rahman to form the government. And since then, after that, the civil disobedience movement started. Pakistan army came to East Pakistan region and tried to contain the movement, and that is when refugees started entering into India, because the atrocities then committed by Pakistani army on its own people then in Bangladesh, today's Bangladesh, then East Pakistan, refugees flowed into India, and this made Indira Gandhi alert. She said internationally this was the reason given that we cannot have taken so much of refugees from Bangladesh. We have to step in to assist Bangladesh. So of course it was a political decision, but then she supported Bangladesh formation. She allowed Bangladesh government in exile to function from India. Mukti Bahini, which was a guerrilla force of Bengali resistance, then it was also supported in all ways by India. So initiatives were taken by her. She also started building international public opinion for the case of Bangladesh, the atrocities being committed there, how refugees are flowing into India and India is being affected. So then, of course, US, China were supporters of Pakistan in that time, and this resulted in a requirement for an international posture too. So for that she feared. There were fears that if India-Pakistan war erupts, USA and China would come to its rescue to help Pakistan. So then India signed an agreement with Russia. So this was a treaty of friendship treaty. So this is India-Soviet Treaty of Peace, Friendship and Cooperation. So this was signed in August in that year, 1971. So this 20-year treaty made sure that if there is any conflict arising, if there is a military threat to India, then Russia would come to its rescue. So this was assured. So this was one step taken, and another step taken was that when to start the war, because if the war is delayed and started in winter, then the Himalayan passes would be snowbound and the Chinese forces could not come in to help Pakistan. So we waited till that time, till December, and then was when the attack took place. As we discussed earlier too, when we were discussing India-US relations with respect to India given major defense partner status by USA presently. This was the time when it sent its fleet in Bay of Bengal trying to threaten India, when India was planning for a war with Pakistan. So these initiatives were taken, but India did not step back. It confidently moved ahead, and a short war was fought, and eventually Pakistani forces surrendered and Bangladesh was formed as an independent nation. Even US then tried to pass resolutions in UN Security Council, but Russia was there with us. It vetoed these resolutions and India could move ahead on its course. So these were the developments, and we had our refugees who had come from Bangladesh going back to their homeland, and Bangladesh found as an independent nation. The next question is, India was one of the most sued countries in 2015. Will the country's new model bilateral investment treaty attract and safeguard foreign investments more effectively? So India has bilateral investment treaties with various countries. It has so far signed 83 different BITs with various countries, but presently we are terminating these BIT agreements because we have formulated a new model BIT, bilateral investment treaty agreement, and this will be the basis on which fresh negotiations would take place and fresh agreements, fresh BITs, bilateral investment treaties, would be signed. So what are these bilateral investment treaties? These are treaties to safeguard foreign investment in a country and also to ensure that the host country's regulatory provisions are functional on this. So there's a balance required on the regulatory provisions and the safeguard to the investor. So this balance is required. But presently what we are seeing is the model BIT is towards regulatory framework and not towards safeguarding the investments. And this change has occurred because India was facing several cases in 2015. It was one of the most sued countries in 2015. So these investors had sued India based on these bilateral investment treaty provisions. So that is why this stance has changed of India. So there are total 17 known investor state dispute settlement cases which have been filed against India by the end of 2015. So these are known. There can be many unknown also. This is as per UNCTAD data, UN Conference on Trade and Development. So why are we facing cases? What is it all about, and what are the provisions under this new model treaty, and how will it affect foreign investment? So we have to see the whole of it. So first of all, about the history of bilateral investment treaty. So we have had many, and the cases which we faced, the significant ones are one about White Industries. This was an Australian investor who sued India based on Australia-India BIT, and in this case India lost in 2011. So here the case was that White Industries and Coal India Limited, there was a dispute, and the Indian judiciary had ruled in favor of White Industries, but still after 10 years of the ruling too, it was not put into effect. So implementation did not happen, and that was the reason why it sued India, and it won. The second case was regarding Antariksh Devas deal. So Antariksh is the commercial arm of ISRO. Devas was an international grouping further formed, and there were corruption cases seen in this deal. There's corruption involved. So Antariksh suspended this deal. So it was planning to develop satellites for Devas. So once this deal was ended, Devas filed an arbitration based on India-Mauritius BIT. So it was based in Mauritius. So then in this case also, India lost. So now it is planning to change its BIT. So presently, the protection of foreign investment which is provided, so there are new foreign investments which will be protected, because even after the treaty is suspended, there are provisions that whatever investments are there presently, they have to be safeguarded. So for them, new treaty would not be applicable. Only for fresh investments which would take place, the new model BIT would be applicable. So then this would affect future investments. So that is one point which we need to keep in mind. And second thing is post-termination, what would happen? So India's ease of doing business ranking is very low. We are ranking 130 out of 190 nations. So we need to further improve it rather than take such steps which will take us back. So that is what the article is arguing. Some major provisions of model BIT we can discuss. So first one is about definition of investment. These are the contentious provisions, the controversial provisions which are there. First one is definition of investment. So presently in the new model BIT, investment is enterprise based definition. Means if it is an enterprise setup, that is an investment. And earlier, in the earlier model BIT which we had of 1993, investment definition was asset based. So whatever be the asset, material, movable, non-movable, everything was considered asset. So investments, all form of investments, everything had to be safeguarded. So now we have narrowed it down to only enterprise based investment. Second is on most favored nations clause. So most favored nation clause means if you have a model of India has a BIT with any other country which is giving it particular status, then any other foreign investor can also claim that status as most favored nation. MFN clause, if you know, under WTO means any nation should be treated same as every other nation. Means every nation should be most favored, no unequal treatment. So on the basis of that, even if it is provision is not part of the BIT with the country, particular country where the foreign investment is coming from, but part of any other BIT treaty, it demands that. So this MFN clause has now not been inserted in the new model treaty. Third is fair and equitable treatment. So fair and equitable treatment was a catch-all clause. Means everything, it can be argued that this is fair and equitable treatment and has to be implemented. So now the government in this model BIT says that fair and equitable treatment would be given only if it is as per some international law. So if the international law specifically claims that this is the way it should be treated, then only this fair and equitable treatment would be applicable. Fourth point, controversial point, is that it requires foreign investors to first go through the domestic process, domestic judicial process, and then only international arbitration. So this is of course quite exhaustive, and no foreign investor wants to go through the Indian judicial process, which is quite delaying. And the last point is counterclaims. So in counterclaims too, India can also not make counterclaims. So even investors' obligations are toned down, even India has abandoned that possibility of it launching counterclaims. So these are some provisions. So of course it would not be attractive to foreign investors. They do not want to to be part of the regulatory mechanism in India, because India changes its laws retrospectively too. Then in that case, how will the foreign investment be protected? As we have seen in the Vodafone case too, that the Income Tax Act was changed retrospectively. Retrospectively means it's applicable from a former date. Means at that time Vodafone could make tax savings, but now the act has changed such that those times too it is applicable. So now Vodafone has to pay taxes. So something like that. So such retrospective effect laws, if they are made, then what will be the safeguard for the foreign investors? And of course the Indian judicial system is too overstretched, as we said, judicial delay, so they don't want to go through this whole system. So now finally protecting Indian investments abroad too, because Indian investors are also there abroad. So bilateral investment treaty is two-way. So if you are making some provisions, then those provisions would also be applicable to your investors abroad. So Indian investors also sue various countries. We have cases of one India-Indonesia BIT, in which Indian mining company has sued Indonesia. One is against Macedonia. So we have Indian investors also suing. So they also have to be safeguarded. That is also a point which the government needs to keep in mind. And of course this BIT, model BIT, is just the model based on which India would negotiate. This is not final. The final will take place after both sides put their points and both concur, agree on what they want to put in the BIT. And then the final BIT would come in place. So what is model BIT is giving us is an upper hand. So we are at a very high end table, and from there we are discussing. So we'll tone down maybe to some extent. The BITs with various countries of course would differ from this model, but we try to keep it as close to the model as possible. So there are some suggestions which this article tries to give, but then we have to wait and watch if BIT is coming forth, but BITs which are not favorable to foreign investors would not even be signed. So that is another point, that bilateral investment treaty negotiations will be long stretch. So that is the only negative aspect of this model BIT. So for that purpose, we have to tone it down to some extent. So existing BIT partners, a balanced approach can be provided through them. So even the present protection which is given, that has to be ensured that the interests of investors would be safeguarded. Without that, it is not possible that foreign investors would come forth and invest in India. So trying to bring in a balance is the point put forth. So that's what it concludes with. The objective of an investment treaty is generally to encourage investment flows. The focus is on mutual benefit of both countries as a result of the investment flows. The investors of both countries have reciprocal protection. So this finally concludes how the BITs should be formulated. So we'll wait and watch what happens when BITs are formulated and negotiated. So we'll come to know. So that is it. These were the two questions for today. Thank you so much.